Rolling. 3, 2, 1. Action. Welcome to Ho-Choka Podcast.
Hello, Mitaki Api, and welcome to Ho-Choka here at the center of St. Joseph's Indian Schools campus. I'm Scott Wooster. I'm joined by Hope McCloskey. And today the two of us host Joseph Marshall III, award-winning author of 18 books. He's a cultural and historical consultant, a teacher, craftsman, administrator, actor, and a public speaker. He joins us to tape for a series directed primarily to our families about the vital task of reinvigorating the cultural identity of Lakota youth. In this podcast, we learn about bows, arrows, and authentic cultural identity. And I'd just like to say welcome, Joseph.
Thank you.
It's good to have you here.
Glad to be here.
Our goal is to provide some practical and concrete advice about what our communities, our families, our friends, and folks like Hope even, what each of us can do to restore a strong identity to our Lakota youth. And we talked a little bit about that in our first half, and we'll delve a little more into that in this half. But I want, as a starting point, to turn it over to you to talk about authenticity. And not too long ago, when I was speaking with somebody who studies Lakota spirituality, we talked about owning white America's problematic history, is the way we referred to it. And he acknowledged, one thing he said was, internally, we're all still kind of adolescents in a way, aren't we, is how he put it, and that was his thought about it. But his point had mostly to do with authenticity. And to be who we are authentically is to acknowledge every part of ourselves, the parts that we're proud of, and then also the parts that we're not so proud of, and that we'd rather not have people know. You illustrate authenticity through the lens of bow making is part of that. And can you take our listeners there, partly with the bow making, but also your thoughts on authenticity as well?
Well, authenticity can be both good and bad. If we're authentic to ourselves, if we're true to ourselves, then we admit who we are and what we are. And we all are individuals. We've all had different life experiences. We all are influenced by our environment, how we were raised, who raised us, what language or languages we speak. All of those things are part and parcel of who we are. That's our authenticity. What you see is what you get. Sometimes it's not so obvious, but we all know who we are. We should. My wife and I, years ago, when we first moved to Santa Fe, went to a restaurant where there was a live music and dancing. It was loud in there. It was an old adobe building, so the ceilings were low, so it was noisy, and it was crowded. And we were sitting in one corner at a high round table, and there were only 3 chairs, and we took 2 of them. And we had dinner, and we were just sitting there watching and listening, and this young woman came, and it was crowded, so she had no other place to sit. So she saw the empty chair at our table, and she said, can I use this chair? Can I sit here? So we said, fine. But she would go and talk to other people. She would go dance with somebody and come back and take a sip of her drink and then walk away. So this went on for a couple hours. And then she was ready to go. But it was so loud in there that in order for people to talk, you had to practically get in each other's faces and shout. So she put on her jacket, and then she motioned to us, so we leaned forward across the table, and she said, "Wherever you go, there you are," and walked away. That's all she said to us. That was the extent of her conversation with us. Wherever you go, there you are. And, I thought, what's wrong with this person? But I thought about it later, and whether she meant it or not,
Right.
it was a very profound statement. Because wherever you go, you take you with you. It's who you are, and you can't escape that. And so we have to be authentic. We have to be who we are. If we are not, then we're putting out a false flag. We're trying to be someone who we're not. And I think one of the lessons I learned in life is you have to be true to who you are. But then again, we're saddled with this issue as Native people, as Lakota people, about our cultural and our cultural identity and our heritage. Some of us are made to feel guilty about not knowing that, not knowing our language, not knowing our history, not knowing our culture. And if you look at it in the strictest definition, then we're not really being authentic to who we are, or part of who we are or should be. I'm a bow maker, as you mentioned. I make bows and arrows. I learned that from my maternal grandfather when I was just a boy. And I sat and watched my grandfather make bows. And he would tell me what he was doing. This is why we do this. This is why we harvest this kind of tree. This is why we split the stave. A stave is the length of wood after you've harvested the tree. The tree is only about 2 or 3 inches in thickness, and then once you cut it down, you cut off all the branches and you split it in half, and that's your stave. You can have 2 bows. But Lakota bows follow a certain design, and it's been that way for God knows how long. When I was a child, the first time I saw a bow was my grandfather's bow. He pulled it out from under his bed, or pulled a box out from under his bed, and opened the box, and there inside the box were a bow, unstrung, and 4 arrows. And I asked him what they were, so he showed me, and I was fascinated with them. I was like 5 years old at the time. And later on, he made me a set of bows and showed me how to use them. And I've been shooting bows ever since. But I also learned, not just the physicality of the bow, but what it meant to be a bow maker. Why we do the things the way we do. One evening, I asked both of them, where did we get the bow? Where does the bow come from? My grandfather didn't say a word. It was my grandmother who answered. She said, the moon gave us the bow. The moon gave us the bow. And the reason she answered was because the moon is considered female in our culture. So my grandfather could have told me, but it had more meaning coming from her because she's a woman. So she said, the next time there's a new moon, we'll show you. So of course, the new moon came around, and you've seen the new moon, the real thin sliver of new moon. And if you remember the shape, it's thickest in the middle and tapers gradually to each end. That's the bow.
Sure.
So when you use that shape, that design, the ash wood can withstand the stress of being drawn thousands and thousands of times. There's the whole physiology of the bow, of tension, of fibers separating, compressing on one side, and so all of that is very interesting. Who figured that out when? I don't know, but somebody did. So in reality, when you look at the moon, there's the bow. So it makes sense that she gave us the bow. Sometime later, I asked, where did we get the arrows? And then it was my grandfather who answered. He said, next time you see the sun's rays come through a bunch of clouds, and you see them, how straight they are. Those are the arrows. And the sun gave us the arrows. And he responded because the sun is male. So it was his job to tell me the story. So the whole point of it is that the bow is female, the arrow is male. Without the arrow, the bow is no good. It has no purpose. Without the bow, the arrow has no purpose. So that's part of the authentic identity of a bow and arrow. It's what it is. And that design has stayed true to Lakota bows for who knows how long. And that point was not lost on me when I was a teenager, when my grandfather said, we were making a bow. He was showing me how to make a bow, and he was, saying, "Oh, do this here, and be careful of this here," because the lesson is, you can't, if you take too much off, you weaken one side, and then you ruin your bow. So it's a very gradual, very long process that takes patience. He paused and he looked at me and he said, "You know what? The way you're making this bow, the way we're making this bow, is the same way Crazy Horse made his. Same process, same wood, maybe not the same tools, but the same design in the end. And it's going to work the same way his did." So, I felt a sense of connection. I felt a sense of authenticity to something that was a fact before I came along. It's part of my identity. It's part of the identity of that bow. It's the design of that bow is authentic to how it all began.
Right.
And so that's what authenticity is to me. What we are, how we started, what we become over the years as a group of people, as well as individually. So as a group of people, if we identify as Lakota or Cheyenne or anything else, then we need to know what that is. We need to know what brought us to who we are and what we did, how we thought, where we lived, all of those factors that comprise our ancestors, who they were, everything about them. That's our authenticity. Those are our roots, if you will. That's what we should go back to. So every time I, touch a bow or I start making one, I think about those things, authenticity and what it means to us as people. And that's, as I said earlier, in an earlier discussion, authenticity is part of identity. If you know who you are, if you know what you are, and you stay true to it, it's a source of strength. It's a source of empowerment when you go out and face the world. So authenticity is very necessary to not just we as individuals, as we collectively, as whatever we are. So that's my story. I'm sticking to it.
I love it. I love the story.
The question I have is, what advice can you give me about how to claim my identity and my authenticity as a Lakota woman?
Well, I teach a class in creative writing this semester at Sinti-Glashka University. And part of the class is obviously to teach students how to write, basically, whatever it is. A poem, an essay, a short story. We're working on a short story now. And one of the exercises that we do to start each class is I give them a list of words, because vocabulary is important to anybody who's going to be a writer. You have to know words. Those are your tools. So we do this. I give them 10 or 12 words, and we work through them together so they can understand what they mean and how they can be used. And one of the things that I also tell them, and I remind them as often as I can, is that you will be asked to communicate all of your life. That's essential to life. We read, we listen, we talk, we write. It's what we should be doing in life. So whether you're going to be a writer or not, you still need to know the process. If you're going to be articulate, if you're going to make your point known in the world, if you're going to put your identity out there, then you need to be able to learn how to do that. But as Native people, just because we're learning English, just because we're refining our skills in English, does not necessarily mean we give up ourselves as a Native person. We're not leaving that behind. We're just developing a skill that will enable us as Native people to get along in the world. So, the most direct piece of advice I can give is find somebody who knows.
Yeah.
It's that simple and it's that hard, because those kind of people are not around so much anymore. But find somebody who knows, especially a woman in your case. Somebody who's a grandmother, somebody who knows the old stories, somebody who knows all the traditions, and somebody who knows history. And those are the people who are going to be your road back to authenticity. There are not as many of them as there used to be, unfortunately, but they're there, and they're also beginning to be more and more Native writers and more Lakota and Dakota writers. So find those sources of information. There's Virginia Driving Hawks Navy. There is Elizabeth Cook Lynn. There are people like that who are Dakota or Lakota who have written books, who have written children's stories. The stories are there. So in the old days, I learned listening to my grandparents and other people. You don't have that opportunity as much anymore, if at all. But you do. But there is the literature out there that you can go to. So the general advice is go to somebody who knows.
Yeah.
Joseph, once again, thank you for joining us here.
My pleasure.
At Ho-Chokeh, at the center of St. Joseph's Indian School campus, where we talk about issues that are central to Native America today. Until next time, stay centered.